Hi, I'm Julia Adolphe, and welcome to LooseLeaf Notebook. Today I am joined by composer Bassoonist Joy Guidry. Joy has been commissioned by Long Beach Opera, the Jack Quartet, and National Sawdust, and has performed with Alarm Will Sound and the International Contemporary Ensemble, to name a few. They won the 2021 Berlin Prize for Young Artists and appeared in the Prototype and Spoleto festivals. Today we discuss Joy's critically acclaimed 2022 album Radical Acceptance and how they protect their mental health while exploring works that delve into personal traumatic memories. This episode of LooseLeaf Notebook is supported by New Music USA and featured on New Music Box. Hi, Joy!
Hey.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Good. It's so great to finally meet you.
I know. Same.
So can you tell me about the genesis of Radical Acceptance?
Yeah. I guess the album idea came from just focusing on storyline. I wanted to tell a story about kind of extending from the EP I did in 2020. So, and that EP was really about talking about when I found out I had bipolar disorder and dealing with mental health and family stuff, and ending kind of like in a better place in a way. And then I thought about okay, I want to get into more in detail, and a label reached out to me to fund it and everything. And I was like, oh shit, okay. The story is like, how did I get here? It was in 2020 with Corona, like so many people's origin story now. I ended up getting Corona in March 2020, so like OG Corona, and it really whipped my ass. So I started therapy again, and I stayed in it for a long time, and they diagnosed me with PTSD, and I was like, another diagnosis. I was really upset about it because I was like, I feel like I have so much going against me already. Like, why is there another thing? But I'm not going to say I found the beauty in it, but I did find peace within it. Because it was just another explanation on why, like, oh my God, sometimes I get so overstimulated and I don't know what this means. I ended up having to switch therapists when I got back to New York, and I was with Lakende for a while, and she taught me about radical acceptance, like the term, and like how it is just, just accepting things in my life that I can't change. Like, I can change the way I see my body and love myself, but like realistically, I'm probably not going to change all of the, billions of people on earth, how they see fatness and blackness and black trans people, and all of this. So she was basically saying, like, you need to do what you can do to make sure that, like, you're living a good life and comfortable with yourself, comfortable with your life, and not putting yourself in certain situations. Like with family, I feel like everyone has a very interesting relationship with their family. And for me, I have just learned, okay, I'm just not bringing these subjects up with my family because I want peace. And so just accepting, like, I can't talk to you about that, or accepting that, like, I have certain shirts in my wardrobe that will never see the light of day, and that is okay. I can wear it around my house, but I just am not comfortable with it. And when the label was asking me, like, oh, what do you want to talk about, I really thought about it, and I was like, oh, I want to tell these stories, and I didn't really know what it was going to be. And
Sure.
Then Jasmine Sullivan came out with Hotels, and it just is one of the best albums I've ever heard in my entire life. And it's just 9 different stories, I believe, of Black women talking about their love life, their sex life, and just being so open. And there's never really been an album like that before. So the way it was structured, I was like, oh my God, okay, that's it. I know what I'm doing. Like, I have the inspiration. So I ended up making 9 stories and telling them with my music, and starting off the first track with me speaking about kind of like the introduction into this album. It was a journey because with exploring electronic music in my way, I've always been drawn to dissonance and spacey ambient music and kind of crunchy things, and I've never really explored melodic content and things like that. So I kind of just pushed my own boundaries with this album sonically, but also with listening to a lot of new types of artists and music, like experimental R&B and experimental hip hop, just a lot of forms of Black music that I've never heard before. I was like, oh my God, am I good enough? Like, is this music cool enough? And I had like a lot of existential dread, and I was like, what is the point of my music? Like, who am I? And then I worked with my mentor, Lisa Harris, like all the time. She's like my big sister. And she just really grounded me. It was like, okay, that artist you like, no one can do what they do because that's who they are. And then she was like, no one can do what you do because you're Joy. And I was like, oh my God, that's so true. So once I got past all that, I could really write the music. Yeah, that's kind of how this album came about.
Wow. Okay. So I have a lot of questions. So
Yes.
We have a lot to dive into. I love what you said about, sort of understanding that you are the only person that can express the music of you, right? Of your voice. When I listened to your album, I felt like you have a very unique voice. And what makes it unique is I hear all of these very disparate influences coming through and sort of like filtering through your lens or like a prism. I was surprised and excited to learn that I believe you started composing fairly recently, right?
Yeah, 2019.
That's it?
Yeah.
Okay, so you started composing in 2019, and then in 2020 you released your first EP, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Darkness is a Myth?
Yes.
That's even more mind-boggling to me that you have a very clear, focused, colorful vision in such a short period of time. And I could hear growth, I felt, from, you said 219 was your first big piece. Is that correct?
Yeah, the film. Yeah.
Let's talk about 219 to start, which has this beautiful video that you're also in. Mm-hmm. You've been very open about your struggle with mental health, more open than most. Mm-hmm. And I would like to hear more about how you evoke those experiences through your music and the technique behind that. So let's start with 219.
Yeah, so that was a very long-term project that I had no idea would turn out the way it did. Bipolar disorder or like mental health disorders that are not depression, because depression is awful. But the other side of things of like schizophrenia, bipolar, PTSD, and those types of diagnoses, those are not talked about nearly as much as depression is. And if it is, it's like very stigmatized, and it's a lot of stereotypes that go with it that are really awful. So I wanted to show the physical aspect of it and how like my body is in pain, or how sometimes like, I think the last time it happened was in 2021 in August. I was practicing and I suddenly got very ill, like the chills, and I felt like I just felt like I was going to pass out. So I like ate, and that didn't help. And then I realized like, oh my God, this is mania. I haven't had like full blown mania in a while. So it really caught me off guard, but just kind of showing that like sometimes I'm out of commission and people don't understand it because they're like, it's just mental. I'm like, no, it's not. And that's why we need more ADA. That's why we need more accessibility and accommodations and things like that. So that was the basis behind that film, because I really just wanted to tell that part of the story. So in the video, you're, which is very beautiful, you're showing, to me, it looked like a mix of, you're clearly in pain physically, but it also seemed like you were kind of self-soothing, maybe, or... it was this kind of beautiful mix, and I felt like musically that there was that as well, because we had some of your vocalizing, your humming, which I read is something you do to self-soothe, and then very expressive bassoon. Is that kind of what you were going for? Exactly, yeah. In the film, every time you see the tattoo of like live your best life, it's actually me covering my heart, but each of those, it's like kind of a breath. But as the piece goes on, now there is less breath. I used this Eartha Kitt sample. She's saying how she feels like in life, sometimes in life she feels like she deserves the abuse she gets and like that she got, and she doesn't know what to do about it. And I did it at the kitchen this fall, and I was like screaming. I was playing with Jesse Cox on percussion, and it was like a lot, but it was very well received. And like I was afraid like people were like, you need to calm down, but everyone's like, no, like people were saying, and I also felt like everything I've been trying to say about mental health really came out. And making this, I realized that I put my body through a lot of re-traumatization, making that. So I was like, okay, I don't want to do that again. But performing it was very cathartic in a way. After the performance, like, people gave me their opinions on it. And one person told me, I feel like you're using your trauma to make money. And I was like, that's a very wild thing to say to someone. And I just kind of asked him, like, what made you come to this conclusion? And what made me different from many other people who tell their story? Because a lot of time people who get to tell their story don't look like me in any capacity. So he kind of admitted to his anti-Blackness in that moment. And I just told him, like, this is something that isn't told. I've never seen something like this, so I wanted to do it. With that work, I only program it to my own accord. Like, if someone does want that, the artist fee has to be pretty high, like, no shade, because it's really traumatic to redo. So I only do that piece, like, maybe once every 6 months now, because it's too much.
So you're saying that the act of performing it is both cathartic but also a little bit re-traumatizing for you?
A little bit. The re-traumatization is not as bad as it used to because I put personal boundaries for myself. One of the big ones is the type of audience I'm doing it for. Like, this is not something I would play for a mostly white audience at all. Because I need to feel like community support around this. And the other is just not making myself scream or even sing or anything or play so sporadically. Like, musically, there are moments where it gets a little wild, but I don't force myself to go in the headspace of trauma anymore. And I used to do that because I didn't know how else to do it. But now I just know how to write music that can do that naturally.
So did you used to believe that you had to be in a traumatic mindset or connected to those feelings in order to create music?
Yeah, like method acting. I thought I really had to do that because I thought back then the only type of music I could write was like this, very trauma-based music. So those days I like did a lot of noise music and things like that, which is just not really what I do anymore. So the growth is real. I still go back to those moments, but in a very different way.
When this man said to you that he felt like you were using your trauma for money, what is your response to that?
Today? Or yeah, today it's just like I felt like he was projecting his insecurities of not being able to express himself in a clear way, because I always had the plan. I just needed the platform, and Banff gave me that platform, and I took it. So and now it's something that I'm always very proud to present or send out to a gallery or something. Like, the benefit of having that standalone now is I don't have to perform it. Yeah, like, I wish him the best, but, like, I knew what I was doing. And when people, I mean, a lot of people have opinions like that, or people have always opinion of anything you do, especially when you're trying to raise awareness for something. But if they're not actively trying to help me or hold me, like, accountable to make something better, I don't care what they're saying.
Right. Right. So how do you set some of those personal boundaries so that you feel safe as an artist expressing yourself, whether that's in live performance or with your collaborators, especially when you're creating work that touches on such vulnerable ideas?
Yeah, I definitely check in with myself. Like, if it's a solo thing, I check in with myself, and I ask myself if I have to do this. So when I do the album live, the first track, just because I have a dick doesn't mean I'm a man, I used to try to force myself to do that track, and I was like, oh my God, like, what am I even going to talk about? And recently for the Look and Listen Festival, so for that, I just didn't do it. I jumped right into the new version of Inner Child that I've been working my ass off on, and I had the best show ever, like, mentally. When I was done, I wasn't exhausted emotionally. So setting those parameters, or with 219, if, like, Jesse's playing with me, I check in and I'm like, do you want to do this today? And making sure people are okay, offering support, and giving them the chance to bounce out at any moment.
I mean, this idea of having a program that's fluid, is so foreign in classical music, but it's quite common everywhere else. And so I think that's a wonderful thing that you can kind of jump from piece to piece depending on how you're feeling, or even just the vibe of the room.
Exactly. So what I'm doing in Berlin is a show called Radical Self-Love, which came before the album, and it's based off of Sonia Renee Taylor's work, and she coined the term radical self-love. And the opening two pieces was very traumatic subject, but it's important to this show, to this set. As I'm rehearsing my set each day, I am not working on the first two pieces. It's with theremin, which is right here. And I'll do the electronic part and practice the theremin, but the speaking stuff is absolutely not happening. I know I'm going to have to be in a certain headspace to talk about the subject that I am, and I think it's an important subject to bring up. But I'm not doing that until it's time. Even in the tech rehearsal, I'm like, let's just practice the theremin. I'll give you some voice shit, but we're just going to do this in the moment. So kind of just giving myself a lot of freedom to know, like, this is your shit. Like, you can do it how you want it. And the tech team, you got to communicate with them because you can't just like pull a fast one, but letting them know from the beginning of like, this is what's going on, be open to change in the moment, or like day of or hour before, and like, we're good to go.
So what is your creative process?
It's kind of changing. My creative process happens pretty fast. With the piece, even with the bigger commissions I've gotten, it still gets done in like 2 weeks. I'm not that person that's going to spend months on a piece, like, unless I have no idea how to write for this instrument. I got asked to write for, I'm not going to say the name of the organization, but I got asked to write a piece that included piano. And I got out of that. I absolutely got out of it. I had no idea how to do that. And I was like, this is a really big commission. I am not doing this for the first time here. I'm so sorry. And so that was just kind of part of my creative practice and process of knowing, like, I wouldn't say a lot on the line here, but I do not have the skill level to match my other writing for this very large performance. So knowing when to back out is a part of my process. But I think a lot about the story. I like to tell a story in every piece, every single one. And it helps me ground myself and like just have clear vision. And it's an actual story that I write down. Okay. I think a good example is the Lucerne piece that's premiering. It's about the Middle Passage. As soon as I like landed on the story of the Middle Passage and like giving honor to the ancestors that were pushed off the ship and voluntarily jumped and died in that way, and like a lot of kids died that way. I mean, it's like horrific. And that part of enslavement history is not talked about, like how the migration of sharks changed with the Middle Passage because they were, so like that people are kind of like, how did sharks get from all the way over there to here? It's like, well, everyone. It goes to kind of with the same thing of like George Washington did not have wooden teeth. Like those were teeth of enslaved Africans. Once I had the story and I knew, I was like, okay, I want to try some new shit. And Lucerne really wanted electronics. I found this website that had a lot of sound samples, and I started just listening to a lot of different electronic music. It has the story of the boat. So you hear the waves, you hear the wood creaking, you hear the chain sliding across the ground, and when they jump off the ship. So I knew I wanted all of those things. And then once I had the resources to do it, it all just fell together. So I give myself a lot of time to figure out the story and really paint it out on Adobe software and just like draw the graphic score, which is usually not the one they get. I don't know. Once I have it all, it takes about like a week or even sometimes like 3 days. But after I finish it, I let it sit. And that's why it's usually a 2-week process. And I go back, I send it to friends, and they're like, fix this mix or fix that. That's kind of my process. I do rely a lot on my community because my ears only work a certain way, and I'm not going to change the entire piece based on someone's opinion, but I definitely have like my circle of 2-3 friends that kind of approve all of my music, and I approve theirs and stuff like that. So that's a big part of the process.
What do you mean your ears only work a certain way?
Since the stories are so personal to me, I just gear towards sensitivity to the music, and not necessarily sometimes how it actually sounds outwardly. So since it is my music, I can just only hear it from my perspective. As the writer, I don't think I can never listen to my music as a listener. I think that's impossible. So like one of my best friends, Caitlin Edwards, she listens to all of my music. She'll give me her honest opinion, and sometimes it's kind of hard. You know, you get defensive immediately. Or when Leo is very descriptive of things, and I'm like, no, but I was doing this here for a reason. And he was like, I get it, but like it's not giving what you think it's giving.
If the listener, if your friends are criticizing a certain part or offering a suggestion, is it sort of, you want it to be in the service of clearly telling the story as opposed to like an opinion, a musical opinion?
Exactly. Yeah. If it's something in the music they just kind of don't like personally, I ask them, I was like, but do you get it? And like, no, it makes sense. And I'm like, okay, thank you. That's all I need.
So does that mean every gesture that you write has an intention?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. These days. And that's why I kind of don't like writing for other people. Like, I will take a commission because I need money. But it is tough because, like, yeah, I've just never written a piece that's just a work, you know? That's just different colors and experimenting in that way. It's hard for me to do that. And I don't really like doing that. So, yeah, with the works that are more personal, or a personal story of, like, my family or a friend or, you know, anything I really believe in, I have to remember to separate myself from it and be open to criticism from people that I really trust.
How do you translate your personal stories or your personal traumas into music? If a student were to ask you, this terrible thing happened to me, or hey, I have PTSD, how do I channel that into music? What advice would you give?
To just not force it. Because it's already in your music. It's because it's who you are. Like, yeah, if someone told me that, I'd be like, that's actually really toxic for you. Like, don't do that. If you're telling a story about it, that's one thing. But for me personally, just playing the music is me processing it. Yeah, I would say don't force anything, or don't try to put yourself in a mental health space to write this with the aspect of PTSD or depression or things in that way. But just find a way that is authentic for you to make the music, and that is cathartic for you. I think it should just be cathartic. Like, it should never make you feel bad. It should never make you should never re-traumatize yourself for any reason whatsoever.
Right. So it's the goal is that you're creating the music in order to process or express your feelings. So does that necessarily imply that you're transforming your experience through writing?
Exactly. So like with Inner Child, you hear the hymn and you hear some very beautiful melodic, and then you hear a lot of crunchy. I wasn't thinking about the things that happened to me when I was younger making that track. It was more like, okay, this was like bad shit that happened. How do I put it in here? And it was like, oh, while the hymn is happening, or while this other melodic thing is happening, there's crunchiness underneath, which represents the duality, you know, of living with both of those situations at once. Or within the internal dialogue in my head constantly, that makes it hard to go to sleep. The section where I'm like playing on my reeds and it's like buzzing around your head. That's what that represents, you know, but I'm not thinking about the bad things that go through my head. And then in 72 hours, I was forcibly hospitalized. It was like kind of voluntary, but I didn't really know what was going to happen to me. So it was like a lot. And when I was making that track, I wasn't really thinking about like, I want to tell my exact experience of being locked away for 3 days. It was more so like, okay, what were the sounds I heard? Or like, what does being in a static place sound like to me? And I made that. And there's like very distorted voices in there. And it's like just hearing people walk outside of the room. You can't really tell what they're saying, but I'm not actively thinking about like the bad memory of it. It's just like kind of painting the soundscape. And the last would be How to Breathe While Dying, which is like, I mean, it's focused on like suicide prevention basically for me, but I'm not thinking about committing suicide while making, it's like the other direction, and like, never romanticizing my mental health or anyone's mental health, but like that track, I think, would be what I answer with like the advice question you asked, the hypothetical, because it is about living while dying, and that can mean so many different things to so many people because we all struggle with different things. But for me, it's living with the trauma and bipolar disorder, and like having the days where I'm like, ooh, I really might not see tomorrow, and then the days of like, ooh, I can't wait for tomorrow, and think everything in the middle. So and just like finding hope, and that's why like the melodies are very rough and haunting in there, but the story behind it is actually like really not sad. And that's why in that track, it starts with this one melody and it gets picked up in different ways. That's different parts of my gospel, different parts of my story being launched off in different bassoons. Yeah, and it all just kind of comes together into this new melody. Like when all these gospels formed, that's when I made this new story. And I can have all of my thoughts form into the life I wanted. And that's when it turns into the more tonal, the more melodic, and all of the different soundscapes. And like I just see all of these tropical birds and tropical colors at the end of it and things like that. And it's like, all of these colors aren't mixing because those gospels, like all this shit is still going to happen for the rest of my life. But it's just finding the colors within and like all of that stuff. So really emphasizing like not focusing on the positive, but I just want to paint the story. I'm not trying to like tell you everything that happened because I don't want to, I don't want to focus on that.
I really identify with how you're describing your process. It's like taking an aspect of how you view the world. So for me, I have anxiety. And so, but again, when I write, it's not about a specific experience of anxiety, but more the sensations and
exactly
the sounds. And it turns it into, or you turn it into almost like an intellectual exercise where you're sort of like, okay, well, how would I put that into a musical gesture? Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a way of reclaiming that mm-hmm. experience. Mm-hmm. But you're right. I mean, it's not forced. It's just kind of this is my experience. This is the most personal experience that I have. So I'm going to create art from that. And it just sort of is a natural, like, occurrence of events, I guess.
Exactly. No, that's, yes.
Okay.
And, like, I found myself almost putting a very, very personal thing into, like, a verbal thing into one of my pieces once. And I was like, you are losing your mind. Like, that, why would you ever do that to yourself? And I joked about it with myself last night of thinking about that is just doing too much. So it's fun getting older and looking back and like my musical ideas maturing, but also my emotional boundaries maturing and just remembering like I have the techniques to tell this story without hurting myself or hurting other people. So
right. Do you ever feel like what you have shared about your mental health gets in the way of people listening to your music for what it is?
No one's ever expressed that to me.
Okay.
But I'm sure, yeah, that's probably has happened. I know the music I write is like some of it I could see being on someone's playlist like every day, like Grace, the ambient one, or Face to Face, the more spacey things. But I understand I make music that's not like the most palatable, like whatever that means and stuff. So I think just naturally I've accepted that everyone's not going to listen to my music. So if someone has a boundary where like my mental health projection and processing just doesn't vibe with them, that's okay. As long as they come from a place of respect with it and like understand why I did it, that's all that matters to me.
Yeah, I guess what my question is coming from my own, fear when I was younger, that if I were to share publicly that, this piece is, it captures an experience of really intense anxiety, that's all listeners would be able to think about. Mm-hmm. And that they wouldn't be able to sort of have their own emotional experience.
Exactly.
And is that something that you think about?
Yeah, that's why, like, a lot with the album, there's no storyline. on Bandcamp or anything. It's like, make your own judgment on it. I used to, like with the EP, I over explained like everything in it. And then that kind of happened. People were like, oh, wow, I hear your story. And I was like, but what are you hearing? And one of my friends admitted, was like, well, it's kind of hard because I already know what you're writing about. So for most of the tracks, yeah, it's just like the music. And the music has its story. And if someone, like an interview like this or like a really close friend is like, okay, what's going on here? I'll tell them. But I don't really give it all away anymore.
Is there something about electronic music that you feel like gives you more space to be your full self or different versions of yourself that you don't find in the acoustic space?
Absolutely. It helps me really explore a type of Afrofuturism that I really resonate with. I have really always resonated with ambient music. Learning Ableton and learning all of the different sounds, it's just helped me expand my art in ways I've never thought I'd be able to do. And that's what I'm all about, just learning and trying new shit. And if it sticks, it sticks. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I really like the space it gives me just to try new things and to work on my rhythm. And it just opens me up to so much of like, I mean, it's going to kind of take a different direction, but opens so much of like the white supremacy that is in our conservatory music education. Because they make it seem like pop music, cinematic music, all of this is lesser. That shit is hard as fuck. Making beats or things like that is just not in my wheelhouse. And it's incredible how people do that. So just exploring different forms of music in my diaspora is a lot easier. Or it's just another way with electronic music that I didn't have before. Honestly, if John Coltrane lived to 2022 somehow, he would have electronics in his music, you know? So it's just finding new ways to express myself, essentially. Right. Yeah.
Do you see yourself learning other instruments to incorporate into your sound world?
Yeah.
You mentioned this piano commission that you didn't want to write for acoustic piano necessarily, but are there other instruments?
Yeah, I mean, on the piano thing, that's probably never going to happen, but I'm okay with that. But this fall, I'm starting my doctorate at UCSD, and King Britt is there, and he does a lot with modular synth, so I'm going to take that class. Wind instruments and stuff, probably flute. I used to play saxophone, and the whole Boehm system of fingerings is like, it makes it easier to kind of pick up again, but I would say the recent obsession has been banjo. And just learning all about it, and the history of it coming, from West Africa and all of these things. It really has inspired me, especially since my family is from Louisiana, like the country part of Louisiana and Texas and stuff. So
you're getting your doctorate in composition?
No, I'm getting in contemporary performance. Okay. I briefly studied composition with Jesse Montgomery at Manus. Ended up not finishing the degree, but I just learned for my personal sake, I just don't really enjoy studying composition, and she was literally one of the best teachers I've ever had, but it just isn't for me. I really missed playing my bassoon in lessons and like working on that type of music and things like that, and working on my own projects.
What do you wish people knew about bipolar disorder?
I wish people knew that it is very physical as long as mental, and that it's a very, very difficult disorder to live with, and it's manageable with medication, but also medication for it is extremely expensive, especially if you don't have insurance, and that there's really no support for it. Like, you can do different types of therapy that work, but medication is kind of the only option that I found that works for myself, and the medication doesn't wild shit to you sometimes, and that you really have to listen to your friends or family members that struggle with this and live with this and understand that, like, it's different day to day for many people. But also it's kind of like with diabetes, there's type 1 and type 2. It's the same thing with bipolar. Bipolar type 1 is described as a lot more intense. And again, I am not a therapist, just going off my own research and talking to people, but they have more intense and long-lasting mania and depressive episodes, while in bipolar 2, it's more, at least from my experience, very heavy on the depressive. And then I have hypomania, where it's like kind of shorter. Like my mania will last for like a day. And just knowing that everyone has different triggers. Like for me, I don't like coffee dates because I do not drink caffeine because it triggers my mania. I like fully support legalization of weed in every capacity, but I do not smoke it because it will give me psychosis. And like, but that kind of goes with anything, any type of sobriety in anyone's mental health or just their livelihood. If someone tells you they're sober, leave it at that. Like, do not question them. Understanding when like I say I am angry or I'm mad, like it's a lot worse on the inside for me. And if I say I need to leave, I need to leave. And just not really take offense to it and things like that, or if I want alone time or something. But to really make a safety plan with your friends, because we have to provide community for each other. And again, like, I think the biggest thing I like to say when I talk about this is just make a plan and learn how to support your friends where you are not drained. And that's what I tell every time I meet a new person that wants to be my friend is I'm going to be very open with you, what I go through, but you need to understand I do not need a savior in any capacity. Like, the only person that I will fully trust that much in my life is whoever I marry, if I get married. So yeah, but I just tell new friends, like, do not try to save me. If I need saving, I will reach out to you, but do not go above and beyond all the time, because it's just tiring. You're going to tire yourself out early on, and this friendship is going to dwindle. Yeah, it's tough, and like just knowing boundaries and everything like that. So just listening and doing your own research. Like, whatever someone struggles with health-wise, physical, mental, all of the above, learn what your friend is going through. Like, do not half-ass it. Like, if your friend has diabetes, you should know how to inject insulin, or, you know, you should just know how to help them. I have anaphylaxis. My friends know how to use an EpiPen. They just really know some intense triggers I have. And like, that's why I don't call everyone my friend. Like, friend is a very big community for me. I've had friends, when my eating disorder acts up, they will go to Trader Joe's for me because they know I'm debilitated, or just in any aspect. If I'm debilitated, I have a very, very close friend that will go to Trader Joe's without me knowing, because he knows what I want, and he's like, I'm on the way, you know, and, or they'll like order Instacart to my house. Like, they go above and beyond. Like, they show me what family, what chosen family is like, because my family at home does the same shit, you know, but they're just far away. So, but they just show me what extended family and how to make your own family, and just things like just shown me so much more of what the word community means.
Yeah. What kind of ADA accessibility types of support do you wish were available, or would you recommend, especially in the music world, let's say?
Having leniency for rehearsals, and shorter rehearsal times, putting how long the piece is in the program, please, Jesus Christ. Especially with some more experimental works or things, like, you're really sitting there for a while, and it's like, okay, I'm starting to disassociate now, and now I'm uncomfortable and I want to leave. Always have an intermission. Like, no matter how cool something seems, it may be very inaccessible. People need to fidget. People need to go walk around. The musicians need a break as well. That, and being lenient with dress code, like, well, just getting rid of the gender dress code. That's not with ADA, but yeah, and just having education on mental health and things like that with ensembles, and especially orchestras, because those usually have like much older members in it, and just again, just having to talk about triggers and things of that capacity. But definite leniency with like attendance within schools or the workplace, and being open to people calling out and having a sub ready. You know, I mean, times are hard, and like, people are really struggling, and people just need more leniency and grace.
Well, thank you so much for joining me and being so honest. And I really do love your work, and I'm excited to see where your career goes.
Thank you. I'm excited to see too. And thanks for having me.
Yeah. So if listeners want to find you and your music, where can they go?
I'm on Bandcamp, Joy Guidry on Bandcamp, and on Instagram, JOE_WEY. And on Spotify is my name as well. So YouTube, all of that. So we're all over there. Yeah.
Well, thanks.
Thank you.
I'm so grateful to Joy for joining us today and reminding me that our health always comes first. Even if you want to or need to explore difficult, dark memories from your past, or something you might be struggling with today, it is so important to make sure that you create a safe space for yourself, and that you have a community around you in case you do need to reach out for help. So thank you, Joy, for your expressive music, and thank you, everyone, for listening. This episode of LooseLeaf Notebook is supported by New Music USA and featured on New Music Box.